This morning, we are having a conversation around Katiba at 15. It is Katiba Day. That was gazetted by His Excellency the President that this was the day that we would celebrate today and remember the day that a new constitution was given to Kenya. And here today, we have for the first time Spice Baraza, whereby we will have conversations not just in the room and not just Kenya's biggest conversation among us and guests, but among more people who will come in to share their views in terms of what's happening. And so we say good morning to those who join us from different parts of the country. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Karibu sana. And as we get into that today, also helping us along with a conversation is someone who will talk to us, talk with us around human rights and actually what we've been able to or not achieve. Dr. Maxwell Miyawa is an international development law scholar and advocate and joins us as well this morning. Doc, good morning.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
I'm great.
Karibu sana, and thank you for being here with us in the Situation Room. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
All right, even as we look at that and get into that conversation this morning, Dennis is here as well. He's going to share today's proverb. We'd like to hear from you, Daktari, and from two of you what your interpretation would be on this proverb.
So yes, our proverb today comes from Seychelles, a country in the southern part of the continent, made of islands. Tourism continues to spearhead the country's economy. They are big in fish farming, especially tuna fish from that country. But let's go to our proverb today. Strike when the iron is hot. Strike when the iron is hot. How would you interpret that?
I think I must have heard of that proverb when I was young. There is always time for everything, I think, in my interpretation. But in English, of course, they say the opportune moment or opportunity. The opportune moment is actually the best time for an action or an action-oriented plan. So that when that moment comes, make or take great use of it. There can never be a second chance. Or if the second chance is there, it may not be as the best as the first. So I think it's always very, very important that when the opportunity arises, make greater use of it, ultimate use of it to your greatest benefit. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll give an opportunity to those joining us today, a lady and a gentleman. So I'll just go with the lady next to me, and then the gentleman with the microphone just stand and as well I interpret the same.
I think strike when the iron is hot. Probably my best interpretation would be that finding the right time to do what you need to do. Because sometimes you know what you need to do, but the timing is off. So you have to find the right time to take the action you need to take and do it to the best of your ability while you have the time to do it. Sometimes you will not always get everything coming at the right time.
So for me, I want to look at it from an entrepreneur's point of view. And sometimes we have brilliant ideas, but there are many ideas that have never seen the light of the day because someone is waiting for the right time to start. They want to have enough money, they want to know someone. But the good thing is the moment you start, you realize things start aligning. So it's always good to start when the idea is still hot.
Yeah, very well. And I think once the microphone comes to you, you'll just introduce yourself as you respond to the questions or contribute to the conversation. Back to you, Indu.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dennis. Okay, so getting into this conversation, 15 years into the promulgation of the Constitution, we're looking at a couple of schedules, actually not a couple, 5 so far, and getting to the place where the implementation of the Constitution is still one that we are dealing with, and we'll start off with you, Doc, is that when we look at the human rights record, the preamble to the Constitution, of course, beginning with we the people, then have certain rights, privileges, sovereignty that has been accorded them by nature of the fact that they're Kenyans within a boundary that is the geographical space that is Kenya, but the subjective side of it, which is the spirit of the country, that they're granted certain rights. And when we look at human rights, the right to life, the right to food and shelter, the right to an education, the right to protection and securities, the right to not be killed or disappeared, those are all entrenched in the Constitution. And these actually made up the first to second schedule of implementation. While they have been implemented, are they being practiced? And what would you see is a threshold that has or had not been met?
Okay. I begin by quoting the famous words of former Chief Justice William Mutunga, who said, and I think he said this just a few weeks before he retired, and his famous words were, constitution making, does not end with the promulgation of the Constitution. It continues with its implementation. The point there that I think the Chief Justice was stating there categorically is that the Constitution is not just a document, it's a living document. It has a soul, it has a body, and it has a mind. But it has to be made to be a practical reality. Now, on the ideas of rights, rights being entrenched in the Constitution, rights, first of all, are supposed to, protect the individual, ensure that the individual realizes their own full potential. Rights are also supposed to protect communities, particularly the marginalized communities. Now, when we look at 15 years later, that's quite a long time, talking about 15 years from now. But I think we probably may not be in the right position to look at 15 years only. You look at probably where we came from, the pre-2010 Constitution. That is what we call the 1969 Constitution. And the guarantees that were entrenched in that Constitution compared perhaps to the fundamental rights that are entrenched in this Constitution and how they have been practiced. The first thing that I can say is that we have come a long way. I think we have come a long way in the promotion of fundamental rights and freedoms. You do that two different things, protection and promotion. Now, then you ask yourself, the question is that how have we fared on, 15 years later post the 2010 Constitution? The first thing that we must state is that we have one of the most progressive, Bill of Rights actually in the world. Other than that of South Africa, because of quite a number of guarantees that it makes. One of them, the very first thing, and I want to talk in the context of people we have seen around, people like Okia Omtata, Okoiti, who have come to the Constitution, that the Constitution has actually made every Kenyan to speak, to realize their right, to realize that they can protect themselves in their own way. That's what Okia Omtata has been doing. The reason why that has been happening is that the Constitution has expanded what we call locus standi, the legal standing. The fact that anybody can move to court, claim their rights, seek the protection of those rights, even if they have not been harmed, even if they have not been injured, including protection of the Constitution. Now, where have we come from in that regard? We have come from a place whereby anytime there was any harm on the public or citizens generally, nobody would have an opportunity to go to court. The only person who, perhaps by law, was enabled to go to court to protect the public was the Attorney General. And you look at cases, for example, the case of Raila Odinga versus the Attorney General, Martha Wangari versus Kenya Times Trust. All these cases would go to court where the public was involved, but they would be thrown out primarily because any member of the public would not have legal standing to protect any member of the public or to bring any claim before the court so that the public can be protected. So we have come a long way in that regard. That's why most recently you have seen Okia Omtata Koiti has consistently gone to court to protect members of the public, to protect the Constitution.
So we're saying that essentially now that as compared to times gone by with this new Constitution, we have the opportunity, for example, to take cases to court and they be heard as citizens protected under law.
That is exactly what I am saying. That under the previous Constitution, there was a great deal of limitation on any members of the public, where there was public harm, where there was public injury, where there was any violation of public interest, so that nobody would approach court except the Attorney General who will bring that claim on behalf of the public. Under the current Constitution, any person can bring a claim to protect the public, to protect public interest On my own, I have personally brought a case against a Chinese constructor who was doing a road development project, and that road development project caused a lot of harm. You know, the violation of the right to a clean and healthy environment, the violation of the rights of the people, the right to development of a particular people, somewhere in the county of Kisumu. Under the previous constitution, I would not have been able to do that. The only person who could have done that was, one, the people who are injured, or the Attorney General. But there comes a time when people do not know their rights. Okay? So where people do not know their rights, anybody can bring a claim on their behalf. And I think that's why our constitution has fundamentally transformed the human rights practice.
In a nutshell, I hear what you're saying. It's opened then a door for the rest of us to lay claim over what we all have been fighting for. Mm-hmm. We've had this conversation since yesterday, and the new constitution was coming from a background of there was a need to come up with something different. Mm-hmm. We had violence that then led Kenyans to demand for a new social contract. And you're saying enough is enough. We need a new governance structure. We need to relook at everything as a country. Now, when we talk about human rights, we've looked at hits, misses, and perhaps gaps in a lot of the structures that have been laid in the Constitution, from how the formation of the police, and where we're seeing gaps where we have oversight bodies, but then we didn't create mechanisms of accountability within that framework. Now, we come to transitional justice. We are coming off violence. That is what then brought this new constitution. And today we are sitting here talking about violence that we've seen in the country since last year. And this violence, depending on how you're looking at it, you have a situation where you have Kenyans then demanding for their rights, the right to be heard, the right to have their side of the story heard, the push for the finance bill. And then you had MPs who are saying, you know what, we're going to pass it anyway. Then the next thing that happened, it spiraled into violence. We saw a lot of young people losing their lives. We go back to this constitution, and I keep talking about the framers of the constitution. The constitution, in this case, in terms of transitional justice, in my opinion, and I want to pick your mind on this, did it envision to create or embed a mechanism for transitional justice, like what we have, the Truth, Justice and Reconciliation Commission report that was sidelined, in terms of if there's a case from the public, not only the people, in this case the police, going to be accountable, but we need a process that then will give the people being affected justice?
I think there you're talking about a very important value, constitutional value, the value of accountability. And accountability, essentially defined, means, one, that you have to be responsible. So there must be certain obligation that you have to fulfill. That's one aspect. So the responsibility dimension of accountability. The second aspect of accountability is that you have to be answerable. Answerable means when called upon, you should be able to explain and give answers, satisfactory answers to the people who are affected. The third aspect of accountability, of course, is the sanction dimension of accountability, that if there is any injury that you have occasioned to the people, where the people have suffered harm, you should be able to be sanctioned by law. And sanction can be in terms of punishment, it can be in terms of public censure, it can be in terms of making people to pay a fine, or making compensation for that matter. And of course here we have been talking about compensation, particularly in cases where people have been harmed, people are expressing their rights, people are demonstrating and picketing and have been harmed. Let's begin with from a very, very critical institution that is envisaged and being provided for in the Constitution. That is the National Police Service. The National Police Service, of course, it's very critical. And we can talk about the police generally, not specifically in relation to the Kenyan police. The police, of course, remember, is the arm or the institution of coercion on behalf of a government. A government is an entity that exists in law to maintain law and order, to ensure that people follow the law, to ensure that people are not harmed, or there is no injury inflicted. But at the very heart of the police cultures at the very heart of police culture, there's one aspect that is always inescapable, is inevitable with the police. That is the culture of, coercion, the culture of brutality in our country. But it's not only in Kenya, it's across the board. I mean, the police force is always very, very coercive. Even that's why they wield a gun every time that's why they're in uniform. Now, the thing is this, that in the process of, and this is what the Constitution envisages, that where a person exercises public power or in the process of conducting public duties, and there is an injury that is occasioned, he must be accountable. And that accountability as well applies to the police force. This arm or agency of the government that always is very coercive, is always very brutal. In fact, that's how the police looks at themselves.
And that's why they changed it from force to service. But
now, yes, that's why it has been changed. But you know what? One thing about Kenyan cultures, public cultures, that cultures really don't change much. And I think that's why there has not been a mental shift.
There's a lot that is coming from this side, Wakili. But even as we have the discussion on National Police Service, remember as the Constitution was being implemented now, there is the aspect of the appointment of the Inspector General, where that now was supposed to be led by the Commission. But you know that Parliament went in and changed how that is done, and the President now had the right now to appoint, then forward that to Parliament. But even as we talk about that, you talk about the Bill of Rights, where we've come as a country. One would ask, we've come from far, but seems as though we are going back to where we were, because nothing much has changed. Look at, you go demonstrate, you're shot. The President himself tells you, I'm going to shoot you in the leg. A member of Parliament, given these powers by Kenyans, says, don't even shoot on the leg, kill them. That is just the reality on the ground. But that's not me to say. Let's just hear what these gentlemen and ladies here have to say. I'll start with the lady.
Okay, my name is Eva. I think our struggle with implementing the Constitution, as Dennis said, is mostly accountability, because the system depends entirely too much on personal integrity. Because it depends on who is in the office, and that determines how things are run in that office. When it comes to roadside proclamations about shoot people in the leg or shoot to kill and all that, that again is dependent on personal integrity, because we've seen cops who will engage with protesters reasonably. We've seen them get insulted and engage with protesters reasonably without any use of force. We've seen cops who have decided, you know what, I'm not dealing with this, and they shoot. They don't care if you die. They don't care if you're injured. That's not their business. We've even had them say things like, you're lucky you're not dead, right? So the reality is, all those oversight commissions, whether it's IPOA or EACC, even the judiciary, it is entirely too dependent on who is sitting there and their personal integrity and their philosophy on how leadership should go. Instead of having a situation where the framework for accountability does not depend on who is in office. The framework for accountability ideally should not depend on whether or not you believe I have the right to live or the right to tell you that you're being stupid. That's because that's what brought the issue, right? Because someone said something and you decide, you know what, I'm offended by this. You get arrested, you get beaten, someone is dead right after that. So ideally, we should move past depending on personal integrity and just build frameworks that work.
I think we'll take two more.
Go ahead.
My name is Obed, and I think it's important for us to go backwards to understand where we find ourselves, especially in terms of issues to do with lack of accountability. The police force and how it was set up especially is a colonial relic, and it was supposed to protect the colonial system at the time, and over time we've inherited it and not much change has been done. The people who've benefited from this are the political class, and they've done it at the expense of the ordinary people. That's why it's very difficult for them today to understand why you go to the streets to protest, despite the fact that the Constitution has given us the right to do so. And this is informed by a relic of also, we call the Public Order Act, which is problematic. And we tried to change that recently. But at the core of it was the Public Order Act, which was problematic. So the concern is we may have cosmetically changed the police from police force to police service, but we didn't change the software, the people. We didn't train them to learn to deal with people and understand that the structure of the new constitution is not the old type, but a new system that is, we say, more advanced and very progressive, but the people want to live with the old order. It's not possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Kindly stand so that I can see.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Anthony Mureithi Moko. I think just to take a back step, when the young people in this country rose in June 2024, they had one simple demand: implement the Constitution. And when you look at the Constitution, it gives separate arms of government independence. And the reason the framers of the Constitution found that to be wise was because the Constitution was supposed to provide checks and balances. Okay? But where are we today? And I'll come to the most recent proclamations by I think it's the leader of majority. When the president, that is executive, attacked the parliament, what did they say? He takes to the floor of parliament and says, we can remove you from office and there's nothing you can do to us. So in that moment, he chooses to exercise the authority given to them, parliament, by the Constitution. Now, the president, again, will also choose to implement the Constitution when it suits him. Now, where do we need to go as a country? And this is where the young people have been coming from. And this is the voice that they feel no one is hearing. They are saying, we need to move from persons to the Constitution. Let the Constitution work as it's supposed to work, not when you few people feel it is supposed to work. So, again, the young people are saying, implement the Constitution as it is written. And that's why they remain. If you ask them, do you have a leader? They say, no, we don't need a leader. Implement the Constitution. It doesn't matter who is leading. If you implement the Constitution, Kenya will run as it's supposed to, and everyone will feel they exist.
If we implement the Constitution, Kenya will run as is. Is it about individuals or is it about constitutionalism?
So let's look at a time gone by where previously to open your mouth and say something would possibly land you, in jail, or worse, would land you disappeared for some time, and then maybe either you turn up dead or, your family members are at a loss as to what happened to you. Many would say, Doc, that the gains that have been made guarantee you just that we can sit in a room like this and have views and we can speak about them in a public manner. Looking at the Constitution over the last 15 years, that it has guaranteed those rights. But what we're saying here seems to be different from that just because you can speak in a public setting doesn't guarantee you that right which has been enshrined in the Constitution. And I believe it was Obed who said that, what, it was cosmetic in change. It was cosmetic. We did the top layer, but we didn't do the inside part of it. Does it not need a little bit more? It sounds like it needs a radical surgery for us to really say truly that human rights are actually then being protected. Is that the case? Okay,
particularly quite a number of issues here. Because it is true that constitutionalism has not quite guaranteed us some of these rights. Of course, constitutionalism means, in broad terms, things to do with democracy, the exercise of fundamental rights and freedoms, the exercise of judicial powers, separation of powers, and so forth. And this is, I go back to where I started from, that the promulgation, the constitution making, does not end with the promulgation of the Constitution. It begins with its implementation. Clearly, 15 years is such a short period of time that we expect, the actualization of all the visions of the Constitution. Remember, there are quite a number of visions. Human rights is one of them, leadership and accountability, devolution, sustainable development, and all these other things. And they will take quite a number of time for us to realize some of them. But here, because we're talking about human rights, anytime we're talking about the implementation, the realization of human rights, we're talking about institutions. And I think I go back to where we're talking about the police, institutional cultures. And I think one of the issues that Dennis raised is that how is it that we expected the Constitution to give us a new beginning, a clean slate, actually a complete break or disjuncture from the past. And that disjuncture would have seen new police cultures, new police behaviors, new political behaviors, new political cultures. But that is not the case. And I think I remember when I was young, by the way, anytime we saw a Land Rover in our village, you would duck into the thicket, you would jump into the river, because that was the hand of the president.
But it still happens today. Does it not still happen today? And
yes.
I think this is what folks are saying.
Yes.
If we can take an interjection just a little bit, Doc, that in the days gone by, you would jump into a thicket. Well, today, during a protest, or if you said something, or even if you put something on social media today, that you are afraid that somebody might pick you up in the evening.
And just to bring in the same perspective, because Obed's talked about something to do with cosmetic, and I feel there's a big disconnect between the political class and we the people. Because look at what the people are asking for, implementation of the Constitution. What are they asking for? And then look at the political class, the kind of bills they are coming to propose. You can remember the bill that was proposed by the former MP, Geoffrey Ruku. You can also look at the one that was proposed by Esther Passaris. They're looking at having more punitive legislations that will protect them from the civilians, whereas the civilians are asking for more accommodative legislations that makes us feel part of this country, whereby when the Constitution is being implemented, all of us feel safe in our country. But what is happening? Right now, no one is feeling safe. So we are looking at, can I peaceably go to the streets and protest and picket for my rights? Or maybe I leave and then never to be seen again. So what are we looking at? I think there's a disconnect and there's lack of goodwill in implementation, because every other person who is in the political class, on the ruling class, they're looking at how can they protect and preserve, and we're not making legislations for posterity, because if you look at such bills, they're looking at how can we protect ourselves right now. But when we are outside there, they're the same people will be now calling against the same.
Thank you. My name is Wycliffe. From my perspective, I think I want to look at it from an umbrella perspective. And one of the things I look at the Constitution being is a guide, not the standard of always operating in the same format. Because the people who drafted the Constitution wanted the Constitution to be able to guide us through from where we were to where we want to be. Now, my biggest disappointment is that the people who are supposed to be the guardians of the Constitution are the same people trying to butcher it, trying to make it seem like it's, regular talk. So one of the things that I look at is that if we're talking about, for example, human rights, what do we want to see in the country? And then let's set a standard for it, so that when we say that we are celebrating, I really don't think there's anything to celebrate at 15, because much as Daktari said, it's been 15 years. We don't see any change.
Wycliffe, let me throw that right back at you. What do we want to see in the country as concerns human rights, whether it's a year later, whether it's 15 years later? What do we want to see?
First of all, my expectation would be we need to see justice. We need to see people being able to say that somebody is held accountable for a crime. One of the things I think we all feel like is that the young people who were killed last year and some who are still disappeared till today, we still see nothing. We have offices, we have institutions, we have people in governance who we've given the power to do something about it, but all we seem to see is a lot of silence. And the political class is coalescing together and telling us that people don't have a voice in this country. And I'm sorry to say, but I don't think we're in a plantation anymore. We're in a country, a republic, where people have voices, and those voices need to be respected and honored.
I think as we ask that question on what we want to see, let's just ask everybody here to just tell us, in one word, what is it that you want to see in this Constitution? what do you want to see with regard to the Constitution and its
Protection of
offering?
human
Okay,
rights.
Sawa, go.
I don't know how to use one word.
All right.
My name is Sophie Mokorenje here, and I would like to say, first of all, it is absolutely naive of us to expect the government of William Samoei Ruto to implement the Constitution, because he led the campaign against this Constitution. He did not want a people-propagated Constitution. So sitting here and expecting him and his cabal to implement this Constitution is wasting our time. In fact, we should be thinking of who then should we mandate with implementing the Constitution. But if you look at the way the Constitution is structured, it is structured to give the people power. And the people power can be exercised directly or indirectly. But if you continue to read into it, the powers are more given to the indirect control of the people through the parliament. But if the parliament fails, then chapter 15 goes to talk about the independent commissions that are there to oversight the state and to ensure that the state actually implements the Constitution. But then there's a catch. Parliament is still the one that is mandated to fund these institutions, to oversight state organs. So have we shot ourselves in the foot by mandating Parliament to fund these oversight institutions? Yet what we're seeing right now is the continued defunding of the state organs, of the commissions that are mandated to oversight them.
Hey, Wakili, kazi kwako.
In terms of what I want to see happening, there's been conversation going around NGCDF. I think I want to see the retention of NGCDF. NGCDF speaks to a fundamental question of social empowerment, of social justice. Those people who are not able to go to school, those areas who have been marginalized for years and years, schools that are dilapidated. When we were young, we went to schools where the door and the window could not be differentiated. We went to school where the floor was all as dusty as the road outside there. Now, I know there have been conversations around, and I'm still talking about social and economic justice to the people who deserve it as part of the implementation of the Constitution, as part of looking back from where we have come from. Now, the Constitution entrenches what we call social and economic rights. Social and economic rights, of which the right to education is one of them. And as a social welfare program, we should be asking ourselves, the country, how do we realize, for instance, the right to education for the people who need it the most? You know, and CDF helps people, even if that's 3,000 or 5,000 shillings, it helps people down there, people who are not able to afford food, even in those day schools. Places where there is no schools. Actually, in my area, the last school that was built was in 1989. We're talking about a particular infrastructure, just to shift the conversation. So in terms of realization of the various aspects of the rights that are entrenched in the Constitution, there can be several mechanisms of doing it. It can be at the national level, at the county level, it can be at the constituency level. I know there have been conversations around the fact that, MPs should only be involved, constitutionally speaking, in representation, legislation and oversight, and that they should not be involved in development projects. But I think the Constitution gives us a duty to protect rights of others, to ensure that the rights of others are not violated. So each and everyone has a duty to uphold the Constitution. Now, in terms of progress, in terms of the realization of rights and fundamental freedoms, other than entrenching social and economic rights in the Constitution, we have seen the judiciary has made pronouncements, for example, that protects particular rights and fundamental freedoms. One of them, of course, the right to housing. There was that case here in Nairobi. It's called Mitubel. Those people who live in Mitumba village. And for many years, the government did not have any policy on housing or how to protect people who live in the slum areas and so forth. And we have seen court making pronouncement to compel the government to undertake particular actions. So the Constitution is a living document. It's a living tree. It has got to be realized, but at least in certain aspects, progressively. You do not expect governance to change overnight just merely because we have the Constitution.
But in some cases, don't we expect that? And there we go, and it's going crazy. So we'll take a couple of comments from you in just a minute. And this is coming off of this premise that I think that's the problem. that shouldn't we expect it to change overnight? Shouldn't we expect that certain things should stop and other things should start? Dennis?
Thank you. I have one big problem. At least where it all starts is everybody has a right to life. That's the only other way you can enjoy all the other rights. But we have a system where we've allowed and supported mediocrity for far too long. And look at the appointments that are made. Look at the people who are given responsibility to take care of very fundamental and institutions. It's unfortunate that we allowed to reward patronage and loyalty at the expense of people who are qualified and have the capacity to do what is right. Because these ones don't question because of loyalty. And the other thing, unfortunately, it's so easy to buy people because a majority of us do not have enough. It's about survival. So today, if I'm going to criticize government, I risk two things, either being out of work or dead, or at least being cancelled completely. So what we need to do is, we have a progressive document, but we live in the past. Vestiges of the old constitution exist. We are trying to create extra-legal institutions, like we're going to call the CIS situation. So the truth is, we do not have goodwill to live as per the current constitution. We probably didn't know what we negotiated for. Unfortunately, the political class are shocked that this is what we decided and it's not working for them. Kenyans have accepted that we need a new constitution and it's working for us. It's not working for the political class because they are controlling people a certain way.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Elijah. I work with the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, which is a creature of the constitution. And my perspective is that the progress and the realization of human rights, and I'd like to return back to the Me Too Bell case, is that the government was told that progressive realization has to have a process in which government must make considerable steps to implement or to realize these rights. And that means placing the appropriate resources in relation to its own capacity to ensure that these rights are realized. I'd like to go back to also some of the situations, especially on the right to property. We've seen massive evictions to give way to corporations because our state has gotten into agreements with foreign entities to provide either economic activities in various parts of the country. And we are seeing massive evacuations of individuals on the pretext that we are trying to bring in a common economic activity, but the manner that it is done violates the integrity and the dignity of these individuals. Even the Ogiek case that, for example, I'd like to use, which Kenya has been cited that it needs to respect the dignity and the culture of these people, but it still has remained a challenge in terms of implementing the decisions that have come from the regional courts and even the Endorois case. So when it comes to certain aspects of the realization of human rights, it's important for us to have an introspection to see, while the aspirations were progressive, especially for economic and social and cultural rights, it does not mean necessarily that we now use that progressive realization to take a back seat and say right to food, right to healthcare should be left. We give ourselves time to progressively realize. I would cite, for example, with the attainment of the right to health is that we should onboard up to at least 15% of the population to have a backing in terms of a support for a medical service system that is available to the people. But we are constantly seeing, as much as our country has been progressive to set up the 4 legislations in terms of realization of universal health care coverage, there are still glaring challenges in terms of how the process of this was attained and also how it is being implemented. We are seeing more cases of corruption, more cases of impropriety, and it calls to us to rethink, to look into our systems and see, while the Constitution has placed the highest standard of attainment of healthcare, then the question is, how are we to attain this? Are we going to attain this because of either political expediency, where bills are passed in record timelines, or are we to do it in a process that is consultative, that is inclusive, that ensures that even the least amongst us in society is also brought on board to ensure that their needs and their rights are guaranteed. Maybe I'll leave it at that.
And you see, Wakili, when you talk about governance and the progression of the same, I'll just take an example in terms of when the Constitution 2010 came into place, there was devolution that was also included there. Once we got to the next election, there was no question of should this wait or not. We got into it full force. Now, it comes to the other laws that have come into place. We talk about in the current dispensation, affordable housing, public participation happened or not. That is subject for debate. But once it was passed in Parliament, did we have a chance? No. We are in it full force. Now, we talk about SHA. Conversations were had. Public participation happened or not, subject for debate. Are we in it full force? Then when it comes to governance, why does there seem as though we can wait?
I think the problem is we've started talking about progression in terms of at my time, when progression should have milestones. There is no other contract in the world where you don't have milestones or KPIs that have to be met within a certain timeline. So, for example, if your contract is to build a new studio, you've been given 2 years. In those 2 years, you will have milestones that you should have met at certain points, whether it will be quarterly, it will be biannually. You will have milestones that you must meet. And if you don't meet them, then you need to come back to the table and say, this is why we were unable to meet them. So we cannot say that, okay, it's progressive, so let's wait. Let's see how it goes. Let's consult. There has to be a timeline, and there has to be milestones that are built into that timeline that tell us this is how far we've gotten. It's the same way we had Vision 2030 that we ended up, we threw it out, I guess. I don't know. Sustainable development goals. They have a timeline. They have a progression that can be it's measurable for all involved, not just for the institution. It is all of us have signed up to a contract where we know at this point in time, whether it's 10 years from now, 30 years from now, we need to be at this place. Again, the struggle we have with holding people accountable is the political class still expects fealty. They expect adoration, like, we appreciate your leadership. No, you are given a job. Dennis, I don't think your boss comes and tells you, thank you very much for doing your job. I love you. Congratulations. Nobody cares.
I actually don't remember the last time we spoke.
Exactly, because the reality is that you were given a job, you're being paid a salary, you expected to deliver. I don't owe you gratitude because you asked for the job. Right? I don't owe you adoration. I don't owe you anything. I expect you to do the job you are given.
I will I'll take it back to you guys. But Dennis, low-key, me, I love you as a
We've been having this for a minute. This bromance eventually will live out maybe face. We're going to take a last comment from Wakili, and then we're going to come back and we're going to have this more in the next hour. So here it is, and we're saying that, it looks as though we need to say, okay, well, you've implemented the first schedule of the Constitution. Congratulations. I'm hearing that there shouldn't be, a congratulatory point that we should be taking here. It's a job is supposed to be done. It needs to be done. And what is front and center is the protection and the safeguarding of the people and what concerns them. What role are the people supposed to play in all of this?
In answering that question, I think everyone here is talking about extra-constitutionalism, or that which is done in non-conformity to the Constitution by the government agencies and other institutions. And actually, I do agree with all of you. I'm not here to speak for the government or to speak against the government, just to give you the proper constitutional view, that which we teach at the university. Always remember, the people who are in charge are who? First of all, these people are politicians. They are members of a political party with particular or purportedly particular ideologies. And the idea about political parties is this, that you galvanize people around you, you go into an election, once you win the majority, you take over the instruments of leadership. And by the way, by their very nature, politicians don't have the interests of the people at heart. These are self-seekers. These are rent seekers, whoever they may be. And then once they take over the institutions of government, the instruments of power, do you know whose interests they serve? And it depends on different polities or political environment. In the United States of America, the government never serves the interests of the people. It is what we call corporate fundamentalism. That's when you talk about tax breaks, you talk about tax breaks for big corporations. You talk about tax relief for billionaires. You know, even when you're talking about healthcare, you don't talk about healthcare in terms of the interests of the people. In other places, for instance, in South Africa, you know, there's this concept that emerged of state capture, you know, by the Guptas, so that all major government projects are given to particular people. When you come to our country, and you remember I talk about politicians who have coalesced around a political party or an association, loose or solid, they take over the instruments of power, and then they do not serve the interests of the people. When you come to our country, that's why every time there's a government appointment, people look at the names. Whose name, which region, which ethnicity, and so forth. The people who are in power serve different interests. It can be personal interests, it can be ethnic interest, it can be any other interest, including a corporate interest. And I think that's why there is a lot of extra-constitutionalism, that which is done outside the Constitution. For instance, you may have the Constitution saying this, but in practice, completely a different thing happens. The reason why we are where we are, is that we have an unholy alliance in our governance structures, an unholy alliance between virtue and vice. Now, and in terms of the leadership of our country, you know, you can have people who are well-meaning. That's why Parliament is there to pass a legislation or a law that is going to govern a particular area. But within that law, certain interests get infused, you know, certain interest gets infused into that law so that it does not serve the legitimate purpose, the people's interest. It does not seek to serve the people's interest. So the biggest challenge in terms of the implementation of the Constitution is not the question of progressivity. It is what we call in political parlance the continuity amid discontinuity of history.
Okay, and it's first ever Spice Baraza, where we're taking views of more than just one voice, but getting to know what everybody has to say about particular issues. And we'll be doing this more often. We'll take Kenya's biggest conversation to the people. And it's interesting because we say to the people, and that is what essentially the Constitution is all about. So, of course, our focus group here in the studio this morning, and as we continue this conversation, we're looking at Katiba at 15, and we're looking at whether the rights which are enshrined and entrenched in the Constitution are then actually being followed. Eva said very clearly before we came in, they said, you know, we're not asking for you to tell us when you've done your job. Just do the job. We don't need to applaud you. Sophie said earlier that, you know, how can we expect to see certain things under the current administration? Has to be a little bit more different. Obed talks about just a cosmetic lift to some of these things, and we're not really entrenching. And this is the conversation that we go into. Wakili, before we went to the break, you said, you know, we're doing a dalliance between vice and virtue, that we're not really interested in, it doesn't seem like we're interested in actually moving this thing forward. We just dancing here and there. Nobody's really landing the date with the girl. Why?
I think one institution where there's a manifestation of that dalliance between vice and virtue is actually Parliament. Parliament is the place where, you know, is the citadel of actually self-interests, self-seekers, people who want self-aggrandizement. But yet at the same time, they are also the people who are tasked with the implementation of the constitution, because the constitution cannot be self-effecting, cannot be self-implementing. It can only be implemented through legislation, various kinds of legislations. For example, I talk about leadership and integrity aspect of the constitution. You're talking about, various acts of parliament that are supposed to implement the constitution. Now, the moment you have individuals who do not care so much, who do not have at heart the country's interests, you're always gonna go wrong with constitutional implementation. And that's why I said just before we took the break that there is a sense in which the disjuncture that we wanted to have from the past has not really happened. So there's still a continuation of the very, very past that the Constitution wanted to put an end to. Actually, the past is still very much with us. All the vices of the past are still very, very much with us. All the poor governance problems are still very, very much with us. And if you remember very, very well in history, and that's why I talk about unholy alliance between virtue and vice. At the time when we were at Bomas and we were talking about, changing the constitution, the Bomas conference, there was a minister, Michuki, who came and said, and he used the example of liver, juggling the liver. And the idea was that really, all we wanted was to get away with Moi. Now that Moi is no longer with us and Kibaki is here with us, why do we really need to change this constitution? And that's why we're talking about government being in the hands of individuals who are naturally, inherently politicians, who are certainly they always serve different interests. And part of that interest is never the interest of the country. That's why we have got it wrong. But let us also spread some hope, in terms of constitutional implementation. Let us spread some hope. Indeed, quite a great things have happened in the last 15 years. Since the advent or the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution. One of them, of course, there are still challenges here and there. There's still problems of corruption. But I think devolution has worked in one way or another. The fact that at least there's decentralization of resources to the people, to the places where they were not there. During our time when we were young, we had what, under the Moi regime, they were calling it district focus for rural development. Money would go into the hands of the PC and the DC, and nobody saw what that money was doing. At least we can see schools being built. At least we can see a small feeder roads in the villages being done. At least you can feel the presence of the government, of the people, by the people, at the local levels. We never saw them. We only saw police Land Rovers in the villages when they were coming to arrest people who are doing brewing changa, or people who are opposed to the Moi regime at that particular time. So in terms of that aspect, it has worked. We have one institution called the judiciary, who has actually managed to keep the government in check. At a time when, in 2013, when the Jubilee administration came into place, the opposition was so weak, it was so muzzled. And at that time, Uhuru Kenyatta tried to, craft all these kinds of legislation, including legislation that were violative of people's rights. And every other time, the High Court said no. They struck out one or two pieces of legislation that would have made Kenya go back to the draconian days. At least there is something that we can say that today, in the Kenya that we live in, we have one institution that is truly independent. Functionally, institutionally independent. We are talking about the judiciary.
Totally disagree.
Okay.
All right.
Somebody who said totally disagree.
Yes.
We'll go to you, Dennis, and then come to totally disagree. I think it was
Yes.
Wycliffe.
Yes.
Just a minute. Let's talk to Dennis in a minute.
At the risk of getting stoned, I will attempt to save you in a way. This morning we had Jeremiah Kioni, who was, you talked about the Bomas conference. And he told us, and well, we've known this for a fact. We live in this country, but like our distinguished lady at the back there said, we sometimes pretend to be too naive. Mm-hmm. We have this tuna kizungu mingi, but kwa ground vitu ni different. He said in Naivasha, MP sat and looked at the document, and they said, look, if you want us to pass this thing in Parliament, you have to remove this recall clause. There's no way they will pass something that will fire them. Or that will create an avenue for them to be recalled. And so the argument was, the framers of the Constitution, the argument was, well, because we really need this document to be passed, what are the concessions? So at that point is, okay, the recall can only happen 2.5 years after somebody is in office. Then they looked at the judiciary and they realized, wait, so we've managed to take this power from the people, but there's a problem with the judiciary. So let's also clothe the judiciary's power. And actually they did that. So it's not entirely independent. And so today, 15 years later, we're still having discussions of amendments that should be made. Whereas we had a commission, and we had Charles Nchai yesterday. The thing is, when Charles Nchai was the chairperson, they were supposed to oversee the implementation of the Constitution, but they were only in office for 4 years, 7 or 8 months, thereabouts. The argument is, currently, they should have stayed at least 10 years to try and look at the measures. You have hits, misses, and the gaps here. So let us try and adjust a lot of these things. Now, my question is, looking at all these conversations, we'll still have to go back to this same parliament that is in a relationship with the executive. And you look at everything that they pass. Yesterday, we were looking at a headline here where now we're having a conversation around pension for judges. Governors are lining up. MCAs are lining up. Ex-councillors are lining up. There's also a conversation on a bill to go as far back as 1984 to 2001. Pay all these people pension. These guys are not passing any bills that touch on these guys in studio here, or myself or yourself. The thing is, it looks like the Constitution has been captured by the National Assembly or by the politicians by extension. What is it that then we'll need to do? Because we're talking Katiba 15. Let's think of the next 15 years with everything that has been happening with this Constitution. What then do people need to do to make sure that they take power back, amend a lot of these things and remove a lot of these things that have given these same people power, and when they go back to Parliament, they're the same people we expect to pass laws that are going to affect them? It will not happen.
This I want to tell you that I have no answer for you.
Okay.
Because these are deeper. These problems, these governance problems run quite deep. And the problems are there at the various levels of the judiciary and Parliament. And ever since we have had no solution. So I cannot sit here and pretend to make solutions. But I think because of the age and the generation and the time in which we live in, let us start also talking about accountability from below. Not top down, but bottom up. The people today, the people of Kenya, of Kenya today are very conscious about their rights. Actually, everybody in Kenya, including my mother, knows everything that is going on. So that if the executive is not working, what are the people of Kenya saying? Can we craft our own mechanisms of putting these people into check? And we do not have to wait until the elections time. We do not have to wait until elections time. The people can come up with their own mechanism of checking these politicians.
Well, they tried to do that last year. This year,
and when people are talking about accountability, people only talk about arresting people and taking them to court. This is what accountability should essentially mean.
Okay.
And that's why I think in other parts of the world, they have town hall meetings where the senator or a member of the house goes back to the people and they get scrutinized. They answer tough questions. Okay? If we are saying recalling an MP is impossible, if you're saying the government is not listening to us, if you're saying corruption institutions or institutions that are supposed to fight corruption are not working, why can't the people do it themselves?
Okay.
Why can we not invent our own mechanisms of putting the government into account or leaders into account?
Well,
because in Kenya, no institution is actually working. Why can we not have what we call institutional bypasses? Why can't the people do it themselves? Because nowadays almost everyone actually almost has a smartphone. Everybody knows what is happening in this country. Do it at your own individual levels. Call back these leaders and ask them, why did you vote the way you did in Parliament? Okay? Why did you not ask the cabinet secretary for this about what he has not done?
Wakili, there's a lot that is coming from here, and one thing that I'm
throwing an intellectual challenge so that people can also think outside the government institutions that are dysfunctional.
Yeah. Okay. So there is the aspect of the Constitution, and the people
shall, not the people may. You know, there is that conversation, and Kenyans say we know where we sit with regard to this. And you talk about the constitution and hope that came with the constitution, and that hope pretty much was stripped away by the legislations that followed further that would come to assist in the implementation of the constitution. We talk about devolution that happened, and people say what we did pretty much is just devolve corruption, because look at what is happening in the devolved units today. It is a sad story. There is, you talk about the rights that Kenyans have, that devolution is working. We can see there is a government that is for the people, by the people, but people are saying it is all right, it is not a favor. That is a job you ought to do. Shut up and do your job. We talk about judiciary and how judiciary has been encapsulated, you know, it has been taken over. And you remember immediately after the 2017 decision by the court, there is a statement that was made by the head of state: we shall revisit. And from that on, you find the funds given to judiciary were cut, and all along judiciary, one might say, has continued to weaken over time. But then again, let's just hear what everyone here has to say. I'll start with you.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it very brief. The more I listen to Professor and the more I listen to our reactions, we actually capture where Kenya is at today. The Professor, and with all due respect, you represent the old way of doing things. We represent the new way of doing things. And I'll come and say, it's like when David bought timber and everything to build the new temple for the Lord. And the Lord told him, you'll buy it, but you'll not build it. Solomon will build it. That is what happened when we proclamated the new constitution. The old people wrote it, but it is the young people who have the ability, the will, and the desire to implement it. And so long we wait for the old to implement it, they don't know how to. They have not even figured it out. We figured it out. And that is why, Professor, when you say things take time, we tell you no, things are as instant coffee. And how is this so? When you wanted to impeach the deputy president in this country, it was instant, through our WhatsApp, that instant. When we wanted to implement housing levy, it was instant. So when we need instant things, it can be done. So today, as we celebrate Katiba 15, I will say, as history has taught us, when we did away with the colonialist, this country was handed over to one old man, Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, and everyone else behind him was young. And that's the reason we had numerous milestones. When we did the new constitution, we were doing away with the old way of doing things. Actually, when you are talking about the American constitution, and you used some very concrete words, I can't remember them. But we don't want to learn about the American system. We want to learn our system that we wrote in the constitution, so that other jurisdictions can say, when you go to Kenya, there's the constitution. That is all we want. We want to be copied as the country that functions under the constitution. Thank you.
Wycliffe?
Thank you, Do. In my opinion, I think, and Wakili actually mentioned it quite concretely, and this is my biggest disappointment. For every single hopeful statement you've said at least. And that is where we are as a country. We keep saying at least, at least. It's like we accept bare minimums as acceptable. We have leaders who have shown us that they don't have respect for life. And this is why when I said I totally disagree, it's because when we look at the judiciary and how the different arms of government work, even today, it's like a deal system. It's what are we going to do in order for us to get to point A to B. A very good example is the housing levy. We have a court that said this thing is unconstitutional. However, we give government time to correct it. Why? It's a system of compromises. And that is what is disappointing a lot of young people in this country. That we cannot sit back and say, for once, enough is enough. We have a problem. Let's fix it. Accept that we went wrong. As a people, we have accepted that we chose bad leaders. We have accepted it as young people. But the people who are in those positions of leaderships don't want to accept that there is a country beyond them. That people have a future beyond them. And the day this country starts operating in an environment where the constitution is not based on personality or people or tribe or region, that is the actual day when Kenya will actually grow. I have a personal motto that I keep saying: Kenya deserves better in every single aspect of how we talk about this country, not only when it comes to the constitution. So for me, when I say it's not a celebration, it should be a reminder of why we wanted that new constitution, so that when we speak about justice, we talk about all Kenyans, not just some of us, but all of us.
You see, the one thing that really affects us as Kenyans is that we're not good readers. So we do not know exactly what is mandated to us by the Constitution. According to the Bill of Rights, every person should enjoy rights and fundamental freedoms to the greatest extent consistent with the nature of that right. And if at all the state comes out and says, okay, we do not have enough funds to give you this particular right, the Constitution specifically states that it is the role of the judiciary to come out and hold the state accountable to the point that they are supposed to prioritize, and this is what the Constitution says, the wildest possible enjoyment of that particular right. Your right to education, your right to health, your right to the highest standards of social justice. So the separation of powers in the Constitution was very deliberate when it came to the protection of the powers that have been mandated to the people. So the judiciary has been captured by the executive, Parliament has been captured by the executive, and it is very sad that the institution that has been mandated to protect the people is the exact institution that is afraid of kutolewa chai ya maziwa, kupunguziwa pesa yao, so that they do not protect the people. Lastly, to talk about people mandate, I will take a case study of Professor Kivutha Kibwana when he was the governor of Makueni. He actually was deliberate in involving the people in his governance to the point that before he passed anything, he took it back to the People's Council. They analyzed every single budget, every single project, and they were able to have an input there. So as Kenyans, we do not have a problem of devolution being implemented to the people where the people get services. Our problem as Kenyans is electing people who do not have goodwill for the people. So for me, the problem, like you have said, is not at the top. The problem is with us as Kenyans when it comes to analyzing the people who we actually give the power to exercise on our behalf. So it begins with refusing to be given those 1,000s and 2,000s. In fact, we should make it very expensive. Like for you to come and talk to me, you should give me money that can pay for my rent for 2 months so that I can listen to you. And that is why they serve their own interests. They want to return that money that they have given you to listen to them. And that is why it is never about the people, but about them. So as Kenyans, we genuinely need a mindset change.
Perhaps that's a question that we can look into, Aseto, and Dennis, even as we ask this question out, every time we talk about the fact that leadership is a representation of the people, that who you select as a leader at whatever level it is actually the person that you would also be if you were there, right? So many have said that we can paint the brush strokes of critique, but who are we actually putting into positions of leadership? Are we thinking really beyond standing in a line in the second Tuesday of August to make the decision at the ballot? Beyond who are we actually making the decision to put in? What do you think? Everybody here is of voting age. What do you think when you're making the decision about who you put into power? We again had a conversation previously where they said, are you voting in people of character? Then it is your fault. If you have not voted in somebody of character, how do you expect that the implementation of the Constitution is going to take place when the people that you've put in are there for their pocket and not for your protection? How?
Thank you very much. I think one thing we have to always focus on is purpose-driven leadership. Unfortunately, even those that are in power, they have the purpose, it's only that it's negative purpose. So we have to look at, when we are going to vote, who are we voting for? And that has been the major problem, because we agitate all we want, but then when it comes to the very time of making the very important decision, we forget. And we're like, who is our person, where do they come from, which language do they speak, which political party do they come from, and all that. So you find a parliament that is full of, maybe, because I've always had an issue with the ruling party having the majority in parliament, because at that point the MPs forget they were elected by the people and now they start serving the party leader. My prayer is, when you're going to vote come 2027, can we look at, because the problem stems from the people who give direct mandate, who are the MPs. If we have people that are straightforward, people that we can vet based on what they do or the track record they have, but not based on what they say, we will have a better country moving forward.
Thanks. I think the struggle with who we vote for starts with the nomination process, because very good candidates falter at the nomination point because they don't have the funds, right? And normally what ends up happening is the person with the deepest pockets gets voted in or gets nominated to the ballot, and then at that point it doesn't matter, because the choice is between, a rock and a piece of coal. There is no difference, right? So the struggle is making it opening up the space where we are not glorifying wealth as a sign of wisdom or as a sign of competence, because we have that problem. Unfortunately, there's a certain mentality we have that because you've made money wherever you've made it, however, we don't even care how you made it, but because you have money, you've shown up with 3 Prados and a V8, then suddenly you know what you're talking about. It has nothing to do with it. It should be that if someone has the passion and the vision to lead his people, it shouldn't matter how deep his pockets are. It shouldn't matter whether they can give you t-shirts or print posters or any of that. It should matter that they have something to present to you. And that paradigm shift is what we need the most, outside of anything else.
I think when you look at the human rights violations that have happened in this country, to a large extent, they've been done by the state. And the state has intentionally deprived Kenyans what they deserve. Examples abound. SHA is a bad example of how to do bad things with people's lives. It is unfortunate that the government is gambling with Kenyans' lives by changing a system that was functioning, albeit with problems, but come up with a different setup that is going to allow the new thieves in town to steal. What pains me, and what Kenyans are asking, is don't give us all these nice stories. Tell us what you think is important. Instead, implement that which is there. Make it work for everybody. And I keep asking this. Today, we talk about empowerment. You see the PA to the president, somebody we did not even elect, going around parading people and insulting people who've been voted in by people, Kenyans. And then you wonder why we have this problem. Partly Kenyans are part of the problem because we vote, but the leadership, the people who appoint, do not want to appoint people who have the capacity, like Prof, to be able to question the system and tell them what you're doing is not right, this is what we need to do. What we want is yes people. People who today you tell jump and they tell you how high. Unfortunately, that's what we've perfected, and there's a degree of shamelessness and nobody gets punished for doing the wrong thing. For instance, you tell me, in May, we cancelled some hospitals, they're not getting, you're paying them from May to August. Who is responsible for this bad behavior? Where did the money go? Get the person and jail them. But because we can't punish people, it's not going to happen. And that's why people will have the power and feel the need to be able to continue to do that. As long as we don't get punished.
Can't punish or won't punish?
We don't want to, because it is work. We are complicit. We try to give public solutions, private solutions to public problems. We have a health system that is dysfunctional. You go to Kenyatta National Hospital today. I'm sorry to say that. Because if you don't know anyone, Ken Walibora sadly passed away because they said they didn't know it was him. What happens to an ordinary Kenyan who has nothing and is not known, has no reputation, what you need is to be able to go to a hospital and get help. Go to a school and get... The problem is the people who are supposed to implement and do what is right are not doing it.
I have a question for Baraza here. How many have voted in any past election? You've all have voted. Before I even ask why and who you vote, well, not who you voted for, but why you voted for the person you voted for, this conversation around every election cycle, I've covered 4 elections as a journalist, and what I've seen is every election cycle we have a rallying call. There's always this euphoria and a movement that propels people then to the ballot. There was a period, 2007, the rallying call at that time, the Tariq, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was 41 against 1. So everybody was themed around it, and everybody went to vote. It didn't matter your affiliation. It was just ethnically propelled and mobilized. 2013, we had that's the period when we had the conversation around analog and digital. So it was the young tax versus the old tax. At the time in Parliament, the average age was around 60, the average age. So people then said, we want a lot of young people in our Parliament. And a lot of guys voted for very many young people, including actors and comedians. 2017, it was Tano Turner. I can't remember the other side. It was always one versus another thing. 2022, it was hustlers versus dynasties. What do you guys think is going to be the rallying call that is going to carry you people and the rest of Kenyans into 2027? What do you think is going to be that thing?
And I think to just top up on what Dennis is asking, the question is, for a very long time we've pointed a blame to those guys. We've voted for them, they are not doing it. But then again, like we've said, what we see is a representation of who we are. Because we are the very same people who wake up in the morning, kumera, we don't care whoever we're putting in. You know what I mean? We are the same people who will line up, take 1,000 bob because I have not voted, give me 1,000 bob to go vote, you know? What is our responsibility in making sure that the people who are there, first of all, we have done our research, interrogated them, and determined that they are the best people? Or is ours to just chill in the house, play Xbox, and not care whoever is on that ballot?
Okay, we can talk about how you play Xbox, but that's okay. We'll answer the question.
This issue about what the rallying call would be and the decision of who to vote for would be determined first from at what capacity is the population able to exercise either the right to vote, to be voted for, or to organize and form political parties and associations that would gear towards securing positions. Important guarantee within our constitution is Chapter 6, which puts a high threshold in terms of integrity of our leadership. But how it is implemented is still a glaring challenge. Also, how people come together. For instance, people within a county ward or within a constituency also is determined by the numbers and also geographical representation. Again, an issue about delimitation of boundaries that is still left. Also, another issue is the level playing field level for every one of us, that as a woman, as a person with disability, as a person from a minority or ethnic minorities within the country, will I have the opportunity, if given a chance, to also vie for these positions? So again, Article 100 of our Constitution and also the articles on the 2/3 gender principle within our Constitution, still yet another glaring gap that ought to happen. Also, the issue around campaign financing within our electoral system. To what capacities are the funding conducted within our institution? We have an act that has remained unimplemented for the longest, passed in 2013, pushed to 2017, not implemented in 2022. We are glaring to now an electioneering cycle where we really do not know where the source of your funding is, and so we do not know which interests you are serving as a political aspirant, or what kind of deals or arrangements will you enter into in the name of preserving or representing the people that you're seeking who want to vote for you. And so some of these challenges must be addressed before we even decide what the rallying call is, because we can come and congregate, and the vulnerability of our population because of unaddressed historical injustices, because of unaddressed economic situations that make most of our population either vulnerable and susceptible to being taken advantage of by the political class, is now the result of what we get is the kind of leaders that we end up choosing. That you can have an individual who's been declared bankrupt, who's been declared not fit for public office, who's been mentioned adversely in different reports implicating grave, serious violations of human rights, taking either a leadership position in our country. So it also is reflective of our society to say that there is, even as we reflect, could we now re-examine our political processes, how the strength of political parties and the strength of the registrar of political parties and how political parties arrange and formulate, can they adhere to the principles of the Constitution, where we have leaders who are appointed in an open process, not the just process where the nominations or the party primaries are conducted in a manner that we do not know who are the members of a political party. Kenyans increasingly finding themselves members of political parties without their own consent. So issues are again around data protection. So even as we think about the leaders that we want to choose, are we in a position as a country to determine that this leader is there legitimately, or is seeking a position in a legitimate manner, or is serving other interests that are beyond us, and that the populace is just playing the role of either useful, I would like to coin it as useful idiots, where you are participating in a process not knowing the grand scale of things, where deals were already negotiated before, and you're just part of the process that will yield an outcome that is seemingly already predetermined.
So, Dennis, you ask a very, very good question, because it is important to know what we need as a people who want the change and live the change we want to see. I have taken a deliberate effort with my friends here. I'm a travel consultant by trade. That's my training. However, I moonlight as an activist. Every evening we do X Spaces on Mondays, Sundays, and Fridays to discuss issues that affect policy, governance, and issues around politics. And our agenda as Mizani 254 is to ensure that we inform Kenyans on policy issues, ensure that Kenyans are informed and told and allowed to participate and make contributions in such a way that it's factual. It's not just about emotions. It's about facts and what we need to do. We've identified areas that have had problems. For instance, we did have a conversation around corruption. In the last week, we've been discussing corruption. And what we have done is, previously we've written to EACC and give information on what we think can be done. We've also held conferences. We had one in March, where we had people talking about purpose-driven leadership. We had the ODPP and EACC participating. What we are trying to do is put young Kenyans together, and Kenyans who are interested in ensuring that we want to see a better leadership, to talk about it, but at the same time, ensure that they are part of the leadership they want to see. Because it's useless to talk about a country that you want to see, but not be a part of that change that you want to see. So that's what we are pushing as a people, to ensure that we get a leadership that is purpose-driven and one that allows and listens to the people. Not because they are saints or you are a saint, but because you have posterity in mind. Because people have to sacrifice now for a better tomorrow, because selfish interest does not help at all.
Wakili, as we come to you just a minute, can I just go to Wakili for a minute and then we'll come back here? Because what I hear, and perhaps it's something that now is starting to stir up in the bellies of people, is that there is a cry for that almost, and if it can't be innate, then you're asking then for there to be a renaissance where you say it's got to come from here. It is not brick and mortar stuff. It's got to come from inside, whereby the people are vested in an accountable government, that it's not just vote you and then we're done with you. It's vote you in and then make sure that everything that you're doing according to the law, but then also according to what the representation of the people dictates. Is that not a possible scenario that Kenya could be entering into today?
That's a possible scenario. But I think having listened to all these gentlemen here, ladies, there is the bottom line of the conversation today, just to wrap it up, is that there is still and there has been a bad governance problem and institutional dysfunction. There has been and there still will be economic marginalization and social exclusion. These are all governance issues. And of course, socioeconomic disadvantage. And all these things are the things that the new constitution intended to reform. But why are we still having these problems? I know I've been the punching bag here because I think there was nobody from the government to be attacked. So people think that I'm thinking from the government. I came here to highlight the intellectual perspective of how far we have come. I don't speak for the government, actually, because really. So the thing is this. The major problem in this country, all these governance dysfunction, institutional dysfunctions, is that we have weaknesses in how we conceive and practice accountability. People think that by voting in new leaders, by voting out leaders, they are holding those leaders accountable. We have to reconceptualize accountability for this constitution to work 15 years from now or post-2010. Can we reconceive accountability? That's why everybody who has spoken here has spoken in what we call in a Jeremiah terms, the hue and cry, like everyone is complaining. Why are we complaining and not providing solutions to these governance problems? The reason why Western government or societies in the West are more successful is that they have functioning modes of accountability. The government listens to them. Okay? If we do not reimagine accountability, the 2010 constitution will not serve us. It will also go down in history as the 1969 constitution. If election as a mode of accountability is not working, and I have not yet offered a solution, we should actually think about them. Actually, I should expect from you guys that if the problem is accountability, there's a problem with accountability because one, people don't really want Shiv and Shah or the housing levy, but the government still goes ahead and passes it and implements it. And nobody wants it. But nobody is actually raising these questions. People are just waiting until 2027 election to send the government home. Why can't we reconceive other ways of ensuring that the government can listen to us? That's why I said, if the institutions of accountability are not working, why can we not come up with other measures, even if it is people-centered? The people-centered mechanisms have worked in other societies. That was my point at the very beginning. So we should not lose hope, okay, in the new constitution that we have, because everyone has spoken about particular entrenched problems of governance, problems of corruption, problems of legislation not working. Why can we not think about, and actually I should expect that everyone should give us. For me, in my view, I think we should have people-centered mechanisms of accountability, however they may want to look like.
Talking about accountability, there's a conversation here, speaking of human rights. The president, in a Gazette notice dated Monday, unveiled a panel of experts on compensation of victims of demonstrations and public protest, which was one of the ways that then these young people are saying from last year, look, we're not happy with this finance bill, you're overtaxing us, it's a burden for us. They went to the streets. And the thing morphed, and we saw a lot of violence against them from the state. Then this thing escalated to now this year during Sabasaba, where we've lost a lot of young people. And all they were simply doing, and they're saying, look, you can't label us as terrorists when you're trying to fight for our rights. This same constitution is what they're fighting for. My question is, in terms of accountability, in your opinion, do you guys think the president is finally saying, look, I'm going to take accountability on my part, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to form this panel, which has the LSK president, Faith Odhiambo, Amnesty International, Idi Irungu Houghton, and the Solicitor General. And without going into too many details, their mandate will run for 120 days from the date of appointment, and the job is to, among other things, also propose legislative and institutional reforms to address issues surrounding protest and policing culture. Do you feel he's taking accountability? Is there I've not even finished the question, they're all shaking their heads. So let me just throw it to you. What do you guys
think? And I think I'll top up on that question. Yes. Can there be compensation?
Yes.
Without justice?
Good.
You know, you've asked a wonderful question. So I am part of the members that lead a campaign called the 50 plus million campaign. And that campaign was basically, it's a group of people who came together to seek for justice. Because before we talk about compensation, we must first of all find justice. And why is this important? As you do the math to calculate the cost of life and the cost of an amputated leg, which one is easier? We must be clever enough to start by saying which are the low-lying fruits. Mm-hmm. Is it easier for today's government to do ballistics and say, Baby Pendo was shot by a bullet from us? So it's easier for us to work backwards and get to the person who actually shot the bullet. So why are we starting with the difficult instead of starting with the easiest? So when we start with what they are saying, compensation and everything, then we dilute the conversation of justice. Mm-hmm. We have parents who have on record saying, I still remember that lady crying when she was burying her 12-year-old daughter. What was her name? Bridget. She said, my daughter will forever be 12. I do not want compensation. You cannot pay me for my daughter. But what I do want is justice. You don't need a commission to tell you that justice is needed. I would want to answer something else that was asked before. And the professor, this is where this generation agrees with your generation. How do we have an accountable country? Is by reducing the interaction of corruption. And how do we reduce the interaction of corruption? Now me and you now again disagree. I disagree with the point of we need NCDDF. No, we don't need it. What we need is legislative members from the county assembly to the governor. All of them should be lobbying for development, not for funds. Imagine a national assembly. I want us to reimagine a national assembly, a senate, a council of governors, where they go to government and tell them, I was elected because I promised a road from Ishiara to Wote. I want that road because my people are asking for that road. Now what do? We have leaders going to ask for money, not for development. We need, now me and you now agree again, we need to calibrate leadership in this country for our MPs to have a Sokohuru where they lobby aggressively, emotionally, and tell CSs, give me the road that my people are asking for. Imagine a country where CS is put to that kind of pressure. Why are we finding it easier to nail Duale with Chief and Shah? Because it is easier to nail one person than Duale saying, no, I devolved it to the county. Then the county says, no, I devolved it to the MP. The MP says, no, I give it to the county assembly. The more we have the chain of money going down, the difficult it is to trace that money.
Okay.
I think the biggest problem with this committee that has been appointed, first of all, that's putting an elastoplast on a fracture and trying to hope that it works out. Let's just tell it as it is, right? So number one, they're supposed to verify. If I read that Gazette notice right, they're supposed to verify the victims who are going to be compensated, yes, right? Then they're supposed to determine what the compensation will be, while also working with IPOA and ODPP to give recommendations, etc. First of all, IPOA is still investigating cases from Baby Pendo.
Yes.
Right? Still. So how we expect these guys to do it in 120 days is beyond me. IPOA hasn't been able to do it in X years. Even from last year, they've not been able to do it. ODPP has cases pending. Some have been forwarded. Nothing has been done with those files. That's what IPOA said, right? IPOA also said the biggest problem they have is they will ask for evidence or they'll summon people and people don't show up, especially within the NPS, right? The committee has been given summoning powers, but how do they enforce the summoning powers? Because if a court of law can hold a police commissioner in contempt and nothing happens to the guy, absolutely nothing, how will a commission enforce a summons? How will they do it? How do we expect them to do it? So all they'll end up doing is tarnishing their legacies, because the president, all he's done is kick the can down the road. And again, when we talk about compensation, what is the price of a life? What is the price of her life?
What's the going price?
I mean, like Bridget was 12. So what her mother has lost is every milestone, right? She doesn't get to see her daughter graduate. She doesn't get to see her daughter get married. She doesn't get to see her daughter have children. What is the price of that, right? For David Chege's wife and children, who saw his brains on the road outside Parliament, what is the price of that? How do we pay that? How do we quantify their pain or their grief or their suffering or their loss? What do you quantify it as? Because that is someone's father, that is someone's son, that is someone's husband, brother, etc., etc. How do you quantify that? He was shot on the road, right? And it's not even cops who carried him away. It was fellow protesters who are also risking getting shot while they carry him away. So what is the price we are putting on that? What is the price we are putting on an amputated leg? And remember, already, persons with disability funding has gone down this year, right? So what price are we putting on that? Like, in reality, we've kicked the can down the road, and I can guarantee you this is what will come out of it. He'll say, this commission, I gave them the job, they weren't able to do it.
Okay, so I just feel this is a diversionary tactic, because even looking at the composition in itself, because we all can remember Faith Odhiambo was selected for another commission during the 2024, after the 2024 demonstration. I think it was the Public Debt Audit Commission.
Yes.
She declined. And then you see now, if anyone checked X yesterday, she was trending, because now people are appealing, don't accept that. And then you see that again will be like, we are supposed to do this, but the very people who are asking for reforms are not willing to come on the table to discuss. Because if you look at the composition of that panel, people are singled out two individuals that really didn't want them to be on that. And that is the LSK president and Amnesty International executive director, because of the stand they have. Yeah. But you see, these people have been put there deliberately. So the question is, were they asked for them to be there, or they're being nominated, then the Gazette notice in public for them to decline, for the same to be deflated back to the public?
People. Okay, these are questions. We'll take another one. Yep.
Yes, having been serving at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, we've documented various violations spanning the period of this task force, which is 2017 up to now. We have cases of over 201 sexual violence victims. We have over 100 deaths from 2017. We have numerous deaths dating from 2023 during the protests that were led by Azimio, and also last year and this year. We are saying this. While we appreciate the terms of reference of this task force that has been set up, we are noting that they are proposing systems for identification and a framework for also categorization of the kind of compensations that would be available, and also making recommendations for reparations and also other mechanisms for accountability. We welcome those. We note that the period is quite short. So at best, they might end up getting a framework. But for you to sufficiently engage with the victims, survivors, and also their families and representatives, it requires a longer period. Even synthesizing and verifying information from IPOA ourselves and even the National Police Service for anyone who was injured. The categories are quite vast. There are people who suffered economic harm. There are people who suffered disability, gunshot wounds, the people who died. There are people who are, all these individuals are demanding justice. And there are key principles that are set out for a proper reparations framework. And it starts with acknowledgement. Can we have a truth-telling session where the state actually acknowledges and says, this happened? Let us not have conflicting figures. Let us have that. And then the issue about restitution to restore people to the situation where they were, and also in concerns around guarantees for non-repetition. So these are some of the considerations that we expect this task force to be very keen on and to establish an appropriate framework.
Indeed. Look, I mean, these are the conversations, and I think we have about 10 seconds left. We can give the last one to you, Wycliffe.
Thank you, Ndu. For me, I get emotional about this because it's very simple. This is not a money problem. The problem with William Ruto and this regime is that for every single problem, they want to throw money at it. This is not a money problem. There's no amount of money you will pay to satisfy the loss of life. And for Professor, you said we need to be hopeful. You said we talk out of anger. This is what hope looks like. The people you see in front of you, this is what hope looks like. And we are speaking like this because we are hopeful for a better country. Nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you very much for making it part of Kenya's biggest conversation and the first ever Spice Baraza this morning. Necessary for us to have these conversations. Dr. Maxwell Miawa, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
And for folks who made part of this focus group, each and every one of you, let these conversations continue, because two things happen when a conversation happens. You keep talking, and then from the talking, something is done about it. So thanks for being here this morning. It's something that we'll do every week starting now. The SpiceFM Baraza will come back next week, and thank you for all the messages that you send in to be part of this focus group, and thank you for making it part of Kenya's biggest conversation this Wednesday, Katiba Day. Something to look forward to. Thank you so much. Good morning at 10 a.m.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.